Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. We're jumping right in today because we're tackling something absolutely foundational for you as undergraduate architecture students. We are setting out to clearly define the fundamental distinction between a mere physical construction and true architecture. It's a core concept, and honestly, it's going to completely shape how you perceive, analyze, and ultimately design the built environment from here on out.
To keep us on track, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The fundamental distinction. 2. Rooms versus architectural spaces. 3. Designing from the inside out. 4. Theory and architectural intent. 5. Historical frameworks of architecture. And finally, 6. Meaning, signification, and aesthetics. Let's get to it.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the fundamental distinction.
So, differentiating these two concepts, building versus architecture, is literally an intellectual necessity for both your theory classes and your practical design work. Think of it this way. A physical structure is promoted to the level of architecture only when it exceeds its basic pragmatic function and material presence. It's got to become an intentional intellectual process. We're not just throwing up some walls and a roof to keep the rain out, right? It's a profound elevation of thought.
And that brings us to the fact that creating architectural form is, at its core, a mental and aesthetic process. You've got to conceptually separate the physical, material structure from the intellectual design. The intellect is where the true form is actually conceived. The bricks, the steel, the glass, that's just the medium. The form itself belongs entirely to the mind, developing toward its own independent aesthetic existence.
Moving right along with Section 2, rooms versus architectural spaces.
Let's ground this in reality. Contrast your basic dorm room with a beautifully designed loft space. A standard building basically just provides a physical room, which, let's be honest, in a dorm's case is pretty much just a secure box to sleep in. But a work of architecture, it provides a designed space. It's intentionally crafted to elevate human experiences, really encouraging things like relaxation, reflection, or inspiration.
What this really reveals is a stark contrast in priorities, the quantitative versus the qualitative. Standard builders rely entirely on basic metrics. They're obsessing over sheer square meter requirements, just making sure they have the basic area to cram in standard furniture. But true architects? We focus on architectural depth. Sure, size matters, but the primary question is always, how can the space support a profound depth of human experience, way beyond just checking a box for square footage? Because here's the trap. Basic building designers often artificially limit themselves by basically designing off a spreadsheet. They'll look at a client brief and mandate, okay, the living room must be exactly 60 square meters, or the bedroom has to be 19. But here's the thing, simply satisfying a math equation doesn't miraculously generate a meaningful architectural space. It just doesn't.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, designing from the inside out.
The methodologies here are complete opposites. The traditional building approach is usually conceived from the outside in. They prioritize what it looks like on the outside first, and then kind of awkwardly force all the interior functions to fit that external shell. True architecture, though, works from the inside out. The internal content, the actual specific nature of the human activity happening inside, that is what ultimately dictates and defines the exterior form.
When you actually take the time to analyze the inner nature of human activities, that data organically generates your geometry. Think about it. By intentionally identifying and separating your calm zones, like bedrooms for privacy and sleep, from high-activity zones meant for socializing, the architecture logically articulates itself. Form follows the human activity, not the other way around.
All right, let's dig into the why with Section 4, Theory and Architectural Intent.
So, why is architectural theory so absolutely crucial? Well, a strong theoretical framework is what guarantees your structure goes beyond just copying common cultural practices or vernacular building habits. Theory gives you a robust framework to organize the pragmatic, semantic, and technical elements of your design. It gives you systematic intent. Without theoretical knowledge, your design is just repeating standard social habits. With it, you are actively authoring an intellectual creation.
I want to pause here for a second because this is huge. Listen to this assertion by architectural theorist Bernard Tschumi. To perceive the architectural space of a building is to perceive something that has been conceived. Let that sink in. Architecture functions as a distinct form of knowledge. When you walk into a masterful space, you aren't just walking into an assembly of materials. You are quite literally walking into a materialized thought.
Let's trace where this all comes from in Section 5, Historical Frameworks of Architecture.
These theoretical distinctions aren't new. They actually have ancient roots. Look at Vitruvius's famous triad from the 1st century BCE. He laid it out clearly. For a structure to be architecture, it must contain 3 things. Firmitas, which is firmness or structural integrity. Utilitas, meaning utility or function. And the crucial 3rd element, venustas, which translates to delight or beauty. It is that essential aesthetic dimension of delight that pushes a strictly utilitarian building straight into the realm of architecture. Jumping forward a bit to the Renaissance, we get Leon Battista Alberti's concept of lineaments. Alberti argued that architecture consists of 2 totally distinct things, lineaments and matter. Matter is just the product of nature, the stone, the timber. But lineaments? Those are the product of thought and reason in the mind of the architect. They're entirely separate from the natural matter. It's that brilliant intellectual line drawn in your mind before a single brick is ever laid. And this echoes perfectly into the modern era with Le Corbusier, who argued that while an engineer achieves harmony through pure math and economy, an architect achieves true beauty through an arrangement of forms that is a pure creation of his spirit.
And that brings us to our final stop, Section 6, Meaning, Signification, and Aesthetics.
True architecture absolutely has to express meaning. Just look at the stunning interior spaces of the Douglas House designed by Richard Meyer. This is not just an enclosure, folks. It is a space communicating deep aesthetic meaning. As we mentioned, architecture consists of that which signifies and that which is signified. The light, the scale, the materials, they are all actively speaking to the occupant.
Because ultimately, architecture is a medium of profound communication. It speaks to us. It conveys formal, conceptual, expressionistic, intellectual, and even spiritual ideas. And expressing these ideas through a rigorous, intentional, intellectual process, that is exactly what elevates a standard structure from a simple building into an enduring work of art. It's that breathtaking leap from mere shelter to profound architecture. Which leaves us with this final critical thought for you to carry forward. When you sit down at your desk to begin your next studio project, what's it going to be? Will you merely act as a builder, satisfying square meter requirements and furniture area necessities? Or will you embrace the intellect, design from the inside out, and intentionally signify meaning? The choice to create true architecture is entirely in your hands.